Rogue Ranger here, bringing you Montoya's Hellraisers. So before we actually get into this, I'm going to give you two things first. First off, I want to give credit to my fellow YouTube user, Thomas Merrick. He does a BattleMechs series called Marlowe's Stingrays, and it's a great series, and I really do recommend it. It's what inspired me to do my own series. So, yeah, go to his profile, watch his videos, give him some comments and likes. Great guy. Secondly, for those of you who don't know what BattleMech is, I'm going to give you just a brief description of it. BattleMech is a simulation program that simulates the tabletop wargaming aspect of the BattleTech franchise. And the miniatures, the maps, the dice rolling, all of that is simulated on the computer. And what we're looking at currently is Mech HQ, which is basically the campaign management part of the software. It allows me to play around with a persistent unit and go through their basically the unit's lifespan as they take contracts, recruit new people. I get to play around with the management and upkeep aspects of the game with this program. So, with that said, we're going to be starting in 3017, which is towards the end of the Third Succession War, and it's the Intratech period. So, very simple rules, so we're going to work our way into the more advanced equipment and rules over time. Since it's been quite a while since I've played BattleMech at all, so be a bit of a journey for all of us. Yeah, Montoya's Hellraisers. I actually have a briefing on the unit written down here. And you don't have to get this detailed when you're building your unit. I just did that for fun, and partly because I'm trying to write a fan fiction about this unit. Hasn't made a lot of progress yet, but once I actually get around to putting it up, I'll include a link or mention it somewhere. And yeah, so you can pause the video and read this description if you want, but I'm just going to go over it briefly. So. The Montoya's Hellraisers is led by Diego Montoya, and he's a native of the Free Worlds League, and he was approached in mid-3016 by a man calling himself Argon. And by that point, Diego he'd retired from the military. He was down on his luck. He was out of money, so he basically didn't have any work either. So Argon approached him and said, "Okay, so I'm willing to give you the money you need to start your own mercenary outfit. The only requirement I have is that I become a member of your administrative staff." And so Diego accepted that offer, and so they set out to find some talent to recruit for the unit. So after that, the first world they visited was Solaris, or the game world as it's known. And it's known as that because mech warriors come and take their BattleMechs into these giant arenas and duke it out with each other in gladiatorial combat. And so while they were on Solaris, they got into several interesting situations, and they encountered two different mech warriors who they hired. And so Diego, Argon, and those two mech warriors basically became the unit's founders. And anyways, they got those guys, and then they left Solaris because there wasn't really anybody else they saw there that they were interested in having on their team. After that, Diego and his team headed for Galatea, also known as the Mercenary Star. And Galatea is a world in the Lyran Commonwealth that's essentially a mercenary hiring hall. Mercenaries go there to find work. Employers go there to hire mercenaries. And mercenaries can go there to sell any salvage. They can go there to pick up new recruits and new equipment, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so while they were on they spent several months on Galatea, and during that time they recruited the rest of enough mech warriors to form a full company of BattleMechs, and now they're ready to hire themselves out. So, Alpha Company here is basically the company of mechs in the unit. I don't have any vehicles or fighters or VTOLs or anything like that. I'm thinking of my basic idea is to get into those units as we go along and purchase them over time once we actually have the money and kind of work our way up to those more advanced things. But pretty much all the time, the meat and potatoes of our unit is going to be Alpha Company. So let's actually go over each of our groups here. So we're going to start with 3rd Lance, which is our recon group. And so they're basically going to be our scouts, information gatherers, artillery spotters, all that kind of stuff. So 3rd Lance is led by Katja Vendelen, and she's a regular pilot, and she is from the Magistracy of Canopus, which is a periphery realm and periphery realms are on the edge of colonized space, and they're kind of the Wild West, the frontier of the BattleTech setting. So anyways, her backstory is that she wanted to be a mech warrior as she was growing up, but she got shunted into infantry when she entered the military because they didn't have any mechs to give her. So one day she was defending a city from a Free Worlds League raiding force, and a mech walked right past the building she was in. So she really wanted to be a mech warrior. So she basically jumped out of the building and grabbed on the next back, climbed up, and climbed up into the cockpit and shot the pilot in the face. And so she was allowed to keep the mech and become a mech warrior. And so she earned her call sign Baka, which is Japanese for idiot, because of that event. She's also a bit of a tomboy. Major tomboy. And she is piloting the Hermes 2. She's in the 2S model, which is basically the standard baseline model for the Hermes at this point in time. So it's a 40-ton mech. It's on the bottom of the medium weight class. 6'9" movement, so it's a decent mover. So yeah, that's nice. It's got a decent amount of armor, 120 points of armor, so it's got decent armor for a 40-tonner. But in the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge amount of armor. So the Hermes carries a flamer, a medium laser, and an AC-5. So it's got the medium laser is good for short range. The flamer allows me to set things on fire, and it can really put the hurt on infantry. And the AC-5 allows me to basically sit back and snipe, which is probably what I'm going to be using this unit for most of the time. That way I don't have to put it in too much danger up close with that thin armor. Moving on, we have Andrea Shinoda. She is from the Free Worlds League, like Diego was. And Andrea actually fought on the rebel side of Anton's revolt. So basically in 3014, Anton had become dissatisfied with the way his brother, Janus Merrick, was ruling the Free Worlds League and started a revolt. And so Janus and his loyalists eventually won the war and executed or banished to prison planets a lot of the rebel forces. Andrea was fighting under fighting for Anton as part of the rebels. But partway through the war, towards the end of the Civil War, she basically saw the writing on the wall, and so she abandoned her unit and went to ground on the world she was on, Sophie's World. That's what it was called. During the chaos of the Civil War, she was able to rob a bank, and after the war ended, she used the funding from her bank robbery to get herself out of the Free Worlds League and all the way to Galatea, where she joined up with Montoya's Hellraisers. She is in the Stinger, which is a 20-ton light mech. It's basically at the bottom of the light mech scale. So, yeah. So it's 6'9" movement, and it can jump 6, which makes it pretty maneuverable overall. Not the fastest light mech, but pretty maneuverable. 48 points of armor, not the greatest armor. You really don't want to get hit by this, especially by a heavy weapon system like an autocannon 10 or 20 or something. Armament is 2 machine guns and a medium laser. Not a whole lot, but decent for a mech of that size. So now we come to Vincent Lavos, and he is actually of mercenary origin. He was actually born on Galatea to parents who were part of a minor mercenary unit. So he's the only character in the unit so far that was born as a mercenary. And he's piloting the Wasp. The Wasp and Stinger are closely related. They're made by different companies, but if I remember correctly, the Stinger was based on the Wasp. So they're both 20 tons. The Wasp has the same movement profile as the Stinger, 696. Same amount of armor, 48 points. And its armament is where it differs. It's got a medium laser, same as the Stinger, but it replaces the machine guns with an SRM2, which gives it some extra, that gives the Wasp some extra punch against enemy vehicles and mechs. And finally, our final member of Third Lance is Cecilia Cotto, and she's from the Draconis Combine. She is a green pilot, and she's also the youngest member of the unit at the age of 19. When she signed up with the unit, she claims to be an independent mech warrior born of small-time mercenaries, but remains cagey about any further details. In reality, she's actually the daughter of a noble in the Draconis Combine. She was attending the Sun Tzu School of Combat, which is a very prestigious mech warrior academy in the Draconis Combine, but she washed out in her second year, and she was really afraid of facing reprisal from her parents. So she ran. She took the family mech and ran off to become a mercenary. She's currently in the Locust. This is another 20-tonner, and it is actually, this is another, so yeah, bottom, low, really small light mech. Movement is 812, and that's actually really good. 812 is generally the fastest, one of the fastest movement profiles you see in BattleTech, especially so during the Succession Wars, where a lot of advanced technology has been lost. So this 812 is probably the fastest movement you're usually going to see. The Locust has 64 points of armor, nearly the maximum for this chassis weight. So that's great. But even with that much armor, even with 64 points of armor, you have to spread that out over a number of different locations. And so anywhere you get hit, you're probably not going to survive for very long in this. So this is not a mech you want to take into pitched combat. The Locust carries 2 machine guns and a medium laser. Same as the Stinger. It's just faster and has more armor without any jump capacity. So, yeah, the Recon Land, yeah, all of these mechs are lightweight. They don't have a lot of armor and they're fast. These are mechs, like I said before, these are our scout mechs. These are the ones who are going to scout for us, find the enemy forces, gain intelligence on them, spot for artillery and all that, but they're not designed to engage in straight up combat. That is not what they're meant for. And if they do have to engage in that, they're not going to last very long. Anyways, so moving on, we're going to take a look at our Pursuit Lance. The Pursuit Lance is basically our fast response unit. They're used for hunting down enemy scout mechs and destroying them, as well as fast response, maybe some raiding. You'll notice that the Pursuit Lance is actually under strength at the moment. That's because when I developed this unit, I rolled randomly to see if any of these mech warriors were dispossessed, which basically means they lost their mech in combat, or it was given to someone else, or they just didn't have one in the first place. And one of my mech warriors did come up dispossessed, so I only have 11 mechs out of the 12 that I need for a full company. But I do have a 12th mech warrior that I can give a mech once I actually manage to get one. Anyway, so the Pursuit Lance is led by Andre Henderson, and he's a really big guy, so his call sign is Bear. He's a regular pilot with a bit of a grasp on tactics and strategy, and he is also the unit's executive officer. He is from the Draconis Combine. He's from the Rasalhague region, and people in the Rasalhague region have mostly European ancestry and customs. So there's been a lot of cultural clashing between the European culture of the Rasalhague district and the rest of the Draconis Combine, which is focused primarily on feudal Japanese culture like Bushido and honor code and Asiatic customs and such. So he actually joined a resistance group that was agitating for the freedom of the Rasalhague district. But when that group turned to basically terrorism to try and get their point across, he didn't like that, and so he left the group and then basically essentially betrayed them to the Draconis Combine to make sure they wouldn't be able to hurt anybody else. And that's left him with a lot of internal conflict since then. Anyways, he later joined the Draconis Combine Mustard Soldiery, or the Combine military. Eventually got disgusted with the incompetence of his superiors and left to find employment as a mercenary. That's how we got him. So he's piloting the Shadowhawk 2K, 55-ton mech, so it's on the top end of the medium weight class. And it's got 5'8" movement, and it can jump 3, so it's relatively nimble for a medium mech, for a 55-tonner at least. 152 points of armor, which is decent. Won't survive a beating by tons of weaponry, but it'll survive long enough. And it's armed with a PPC and an LRM-5. So it doesn't have any close-range weapons, and both of its weapon systems actually have penalties when trying to hit a target within a certain range. So this is definitely a long-range sniper unit that I'm going to be keeping back and using to kind of snipe at my enemies from long range. The 2K is actually a Kurita variant. The 2H is the standard, I believe. Anyway, so after him we have Savitashri Burke. She is from the Free Worlds League, and she was raised on one of the backwater planets on the periphery edge of the Free Worlds League. She grew up in the backwoods of her homeworld, and then later stowed away on a free trader. She managed to get several planets away before she was discovered and kicked off. And then after that, she spent several years on the streets, but was finally picked up and tutored by a man who basically became like a surrogate father to her, until she found out that he was actually basically a boss in organized crime. He's basically a mafia boss. And so he basically trained her as a mech warrior and got her into the Free World's military. The price was just the fact that she had to help their criminal endeavors as compensation for all the raids. So when she mustered out, she made a run for it, and something that they didn't expect, and managed to get away from for the time being. So she's a regular mech pilot, and she's piloting the Falcon. I was actually kind of surprised when I rolled this up on the random assignment table, because if I remember correctly, the Falcon's kind of a rather rare mech to find during the Succession Wars. Afterwards, after the technology renaissance in the 3040s and 3050s, it becomes more common, but during the Succession Wars, I'm pretty sure it's not easy to find. Anyway, so it's a 30-tonner, so it is a light mech, but it's towards the heavier end of the light mech scale. 6'9", and it can jump 6, so it's pretty nimble. 96 points of armor, which is relatively decent, but then again, any light mech in any light mech, no matter how much armor you have, you're not really going to survive long in a stand-up battle, especially against forces heavier than you. The Falcon is armed with 2 small lasers, a medium laser, and 2 machine guns, and the machine guns are mounted in the rear. This is the rear-mounted weapons is something you usually only see in the chassis that were designed during the early days of the BattleTech franchise. So most of the Succession Wars designs are the ones that mount rear-mounted weapons, and they're useful if someone gets into your rear, behind your mech, where normally you can't target them, but in general use they're kind of dubious. So I may eventually modify this to move the machine guns to the front. Overall, though, decent light mech, could work well as a scout killer. Next, we've got Melvin Mosa. He's from the Lyran Commonwealth. He actually grew up as he grew up in a small fishing community on the planet of Bountiful Harvest. There was, it was basically a closed community, kind of a closed community made up of descendants of the Pacific Islanders. So like the Philippines, Hawaii, the Samoans, all that kind of stuff. His parents died in a storm while they were out fishing when he was really young, and so the other community members looked after him for a while. But he was adopted by a passing band of mercenaries when he was 8, something like that. Spent the rest of his life traveling with them, and when his adoptive unit, eventually fell apart, he used his savings to get himself back to Galatea so he could hopefully join another command, and that's where we found him. And he's a bit of a pyromaniac, which is where he got his call sign Hothead, and it's well suited to his choice of mech, which is a fire starter. So the fire starter is 35 tons, so it's a light mech, but it's the heaviest weight that a light mech can be. So movement of 6'9" with a jump of 6, so that's great. That's pretty maneuverable. Only 88 points of armor, but then again, that's not horrible. But mainly because the Firestarter isn't designed as a stand-up combat mech, and that's reflected in its weapons loadout. The only two actual weapons that the Firestarter mounts that could give a decent punch against mechs are the 2 medium lasers. All the other weapons are devoted to weapons that are used for other purposes. So you've got 2 machine guns, and then you've got 4 flamers, one of which is in the rear. So this is a great anti-infantry mech. It also works. It's basically designed to set fires, set things on fire. It works well for killing infantry, and it might work. I think it might work well against like lightweight vehicles, but against anything heavier than maybe like a light tank, it's not terribly useful. Anyways, so that is the Pursuit Lance. So we're going to move on to the Command Lance. And this is basically, this is our main combat unit. The Command Lance is basically our main line of battle unit, despite the fact that it's not the heaviest weight class, unfortunately. And it's also where our commander resides. So here we have Captain Diego Montoya. He is our unit's he is the commander of our unit. You might notice that he has a lot more skills. Hold on. Oh, excuse me. You'll notice that he has a lot more skills than most of the other unit members do. And that's because I actually used the BattleTech RPG system, which is found in the book A Time in the... Bleh. See, I used the BattleTech's RPG system to generate him. And so that's where he gets all these different skills. And so he is from the Free Worlds League. He is the unit's commanding officer, as I said, and he is also one of the founders. So because he's a founder, he actually gets a bonus on retirement rolls. So whenever a retirement roll is made, he actually gets a bonus that says he gets a bonus to that makes him less likely to leave the unit and go into retirement. Anyway, so he grew up on a periphery world. He grew up on a Free Worlds. He grew up in the Free Worlds League. Lived on a periphery world, so it was near the outer edge of the Free Worlds League. His parents died during a pirate raid, and his older brother later fell ill and died that way. He got into a prestigious MechWarrior Academy with the help of a family friend who was a former alumni of that academy, and he excelled there and was eventually invited to join SAFE, which is essentially the intelligence division of the Free Worlds League government, kind of like the CIA. He subsequently spent some time training and then joined the Dark Shadows, which was a BattleMech division, which is basically a BattleMech group designed for performing covert operations that require more brute force than finesse. So things like a lot of the commando raids back in World War II, or maybe the Scud hunting missions in during Desert Storm. Anyways, so when the rebellion when Anton started his rebellion in 3014, Diego was promoted to major and given command of a ad hoc battalion tasked with going behind the front lines of the conflict and destroying rebel supply depots, all that kind of stuff. Basically disrupting the enemy supply lines. And so that actually could create a bit of an interesting dynamic between Andrea and Diego, because Diego fought on the loyalist side and Andrea fought on the rebel side. But of course, Diego doesn't know yet that Andrea fought for the rebels. Anyways, so but he lost his arm on Callaway 6 while dueling Natasha Kerensky. Basically, he managed to do enough damage that she had to retreat. But while she was doing so, she got off a final shot that hit his cockpit, obliterated his mech's head, and he was able to eject in time, but he lost his right arm in the process of the ejection. And so when he got back to safe, he was shunted into a desk job and then retired because he was unsatisfied with that. And it was after that Argonne came across him. He is piloting the Hermes 2M. So the 2M Mercury is a special variant that was designed for safe. So it's roughly the same as the Hermes 2S, but it strips out the autocannon and the ammunition for that. And it uses that extra space to up the speed a bit. So it goes from 6.9 to 7.11. And then it uses the rest of that space to add 2 medium lasers and a pair of machine guns. So it's got added potential against infantry. It's got 3 medium lasers now, but those are short range weapons. So that added speed is probably going to be necessary just to get in range before I get blown to bits by long range fire from my opponents. Next up, we have Hana Seng. And she is another of the unit's founders. She was one of the 2 that was recruited on Solaris. And she's originally from the Capellan Confederation. And she didn't like the caste system and the strict rules and society in that nation, but she didn't really have much else choice. So basically she became a worker in a BattleMech repair and maintenance, basically a BattleMech maintenance facility. And one day, she enjoyed the technical work, but then one day, her superiors she came across a Javelin chassis that her superiors had written off as just total scrap, couldn't be salvaged, and so they were just going to throw it away. And so she took a really big risk when she had it smuggled out of the factory. And over the next 4 years, she worked on it off and on. It was basically a labor of love, and so she rebuilt that unit basically from the ground up, using just junk and scrap and and all that kind of stuff. And so after that, she wanted to leave the Capellan Confederation and make her own way in life. So, but she didn't have the money, so she lied to a local loan shark in order to get the money that she needed to pay for passage, and then she ran off without paying him. So she headed for Solaris, and then once she got there, she got mixed up with a triad group, and that's when Diego came across her, and he helped her get out of that situation, and then she teamed up with him and joined the unit. So she's a regular pilot and pretty good tech. I think she's a veteran technician. And she is piloting the Javelin. So it's a 30-tonner. It's a 30-ton light mech. It's got a movement. It can move 6'9", and it's got a jump of 6, so pretty nimble. Not the greatest armor. It's only got 64 points of armor, same as a Locust, which is like 10 tons lighter. So not the best armor. As for armament, we're dealing with 2 SRM-6s, so it's got lots of short-range firepower there. But it's only got 15 shots for each of those launchers, unfortunately. I am playing with quirks enabled in this game from the start. So quirks are essentially additional rules that you can add that are completely optional. And what they do is they add little benefits, pros and cons to the different units. So like The javelin has the unbalanced quirk because it's kind of top heavy, and it doesn't it's a bit harder to keep upright while you're running around. I added because Hannah basically built her mech from the ground up using scrap and parts, and it's basically holding together using duct tape and a prayer. I added the non-standard parts and difficult to maintain quirks. Something to keep in mind is that some quirks don't really have an effect. Non-standard parts doesn't really seem to have an effect in the game at this point in time. But difficult to maintain means that that any repair rolls or stuff like that there's going to be a penalty on those rolls, and that's because it's basically it's a cobbled together mech. It's not using standard parts. It's not easy to maintain. So yeah, next up in the command lands we have Yoshimatsu Sakaguchi, and he is the third founder in the unit. The only other founder, we don't have, none of the other members in the combat lineup are founders. The only other founder is Argon, and we'll get to him in a minute. So he is originally from the Draconis Combine, and he was actually a soldier in the Combine military. He graduated from the very prestigious Sunjiang Mech Warrior Academy. It's like the top of the line academy for the Combine military. He was a junior officer in the military, but he later got discharged from the military. He basically got thrown out of the military for insubordination and reckless behavior, which was kind of a side effect of his adrenaline addiction. And so, so hoping to feed that addiction of his, he headed for Solaris, and he won his mech in a card game there, and signed up with one of the stables there, and did quite well. Became a bit of a fan favorite. Eventually started, getting tired of that, and then met up with Diego and decided to jump on the bandwagon with him. So he is actually an elite pilot. Diego is a veteran. Diego's a veteran pilot, and Yoshimatsu is our only elite pilot. Everybody else is regular except for Cecilia, because she's green. So he also has a slight knowledge of tactics, but he basically said, oh no, I don't want a command position, too much paperwork. So he wanted an enlisted position. So he wasn't given command of any of the lances. So he's kind of like, I'm intending to use him kind of like the bodyguard for Diego, since he's got a heavy mech. So yeah, he's the elite pilot in the unit. He's the most skilled pilot in the unit. And he pilots the Dragon, which is a heavy mech, though it's at 60 tons, so it's on the bottom end of the heavyweight scale. And so anyway, so the Dragon has a movement of 5'8", which is a bit nippy for a heavy mech. Most heavy mechs are 4'6", have a movement of 4'6". Of course, for a heavy mech to move that fast requires a gigantic engine, and unfortunately, the Dragon pays for that in armor and weapons. It only mounts 160 points of armor, which isn't much more than Diego's Mercury mounts. It's like 40 points more, and that's it. So it can't take a lot of damage. The other penalty that it has to take for being able to move that fast is that it can't mount a huge amount of weapons, and those weapons generally can't be as big or powerful as those on a slower mech could be. So it carries an AC-5, an LRM-10, and 2 medium lasers, one which is in the rear. So it's got very little short-range power, but it's got really good long-range firepower. That autocannon LRM can really reach out and touch people. So this is going to have to be kind of a sniper unit, more than likely. Anyways, so last member of our combat lineup is Hung Yu, and she's from the Capellan Confederation. She was kind of a street rat. She was orphaned at a really young age, grew up on the streets. She enlisted at a special school that the Capellan Confederation runs, known as a Duchy RTC, and that's the type of school that the Confederation runs. There's a large number of Duchy RTCs scattered around there. their territory. And what they do is they train vehicle crews and infantry. They don't train mech warriors. Anyways, so that's anyways. But so she joined that RTC as soon as she was old enough, and during that time she actually left that school and was sent to a undisclosed facility for special training. And then after that, she was assigned as a mech warrior in Vincent's Commandos, which is one of the Capellan military units. In late 3014, she was actually sacked and discharged from the the Capellan military sacked her and threw her out of the military. Although the reasons are there's no record of why they did it. So she stole her mech, the mech that she currently has from her unit's main hangar, and then left and became a mercenary. She is, a lot of her records are missing. So the funny thing about Hung Yu is that the way I've written her backstory, a lot of her records are missing or blacked out. So there's not a lot of information on her. So she's kind of the mystery person. She's kind of the secondary mystery person in the group alongside Argon. She is a regular pilot, and she pilots the Vindicator. So this is a 45-ton mech, so that makes it a medium. That's on the lower end. It's relatively slow for a medium with only with a movement of 4.6, but it can jump 4 as well. And it doesn't have to be too terribly fast because it's designed as a kind of a fire support, a long-range fire support unit. Got decent armor, 144 points, which is pretty decent for a medium, especially 45-tonner. Armament is a small laser, a medium laser, a PPC, and an LRM-5. I like the PPC. PPCs are good long-range weapons. Anyway, this doesn't have a lot of short-range firepower. So this is again kind of a sniper unit. It's slow, so it's not going to be able to keep up with some of the faster mechs in the command lance but it can hang back and it's fast enough that it can generally keep up, will keep close enough. It's fast enough that it can stay close enough to provide decent fire support and from long range. In the lore, the Vindicator is a Capellan mech. It's basically a Capellan only mech essentially, although you can't find it in other places because the company that makes it does export it. But according to the lore, the Vindicator is essentially the standard medium mech of the Capellan Confederation. It's their standard medium, no frills, nothing fancy, nothing really to distinguish it. Really, it's just their bog standard medium mech. And that is our different lances in Montoya's Hellraisers. So we're going to go over and come to our personnel and take a look at our support personnel. So Argon here, this is Argon. He's in his very early 50s. He is an elite administrator and negotiator, and he has some knowledge of tactics as well. He is the final founder of the unit. He's head of the support staff. He's kind of the main mystery man of this unit. He's like the mysterious benefactor that nobody really knows about. We know we know his ancestry, but we don't. We know his ancestry. So he's German. He's got mixed German and Irish blood in him. But where he comes from and where he was born is completely unknown. So he's kind of the mysterious benefactor of the unit. He, as I said, he initially approached Diego to offer him, the opportunity to build his own mercenary unit, and he also hinted that he knew something of Diego's past role as a member of SAFE, which kind of is suspicious, which is the suspicious part, because when Diego joined SAFE, he actually took on an alternate identity, and so for Argon to know about that Diego was actually a part of SAFE is, definitely makes him somewhat of a suspicious character. He's kind of he's a great administrator. He's really good at negotiating and administrating, but he's got a short temper, drinks heavily, and so that's led to more than a couple shouting matches between him and Diego. Anyways, so moving past him, we have 4 BattleMech technicians. I haven't got a whole. This is the depths of the Succession Wars, where skilled technical help is hard to find. So instead of starting with a full technical crew, I've started with 4 technicians for my BattleMechs to basically just keep them in operating condition and do whatever repairs they can. We also have 2 assistant technicians, full-time assistant technicians, Mick Starman and Linda Hashimoto, and these 2 are basically the interns. They're the apprentices that are training under the actual technicians. And then we've got our doctor, Padma Nadia. Padma Nadia. She's our unit's doctor, and she's a veteran doctor, so she's pretty good. We don't have our own dropship yet, unfortunately, but for a unit during the Succession Wars, that seemed like a bit much to start with. So that's something we'll have to earn on our own. We've also got a stock of spare parts. We've got some ammunition for our different weapons. We've got some spare heat sinks, and I picked up the extra life support system just on a whim. And we've got a bunch of extra armor as well to replace any armor that gets blown off in battle. So overall, yeah, we are pretty much ready to start. So next session is the next video that I post will feature the Hellraisers taking their first contract and hopefully not going for broke. So yeah, this is Rogue Ranger signing off.